Under the glass roof overlooking the Manhattan skyline, yellow lights sprinkled onto the floor like honey, the Russo Global Foods 30 years logo glimmering behind. Carmela, my mother-in-law, raised her glass and smiled as if everything were perfect. Then she dropped a line full of sarcasm and coldness. This girl doesn't have status. I stood in the Long Island City banquet hall, my hand still warm from the champagne flute, and my heart felt like it fell out of my chest. A few seconds later, my attorney, Aisha, stepped out, plugged her phone into the speaker. The whole room held its breath. A familiar voice rang out, clear word by word. Transfer $25K as a processing fee. I have someone in the department, otherwise, I'll call ICE. There were no more clinking glasses. There was only a bare truth amid the gleaming suits. Someone had used fear to teach me to be silent. I am Ana Morales, 28 years old, the narrator of this story. Not to complain, but to take back my own voice. I came to New York with a suitcase, a morning shift job, and a small dream. A quiet meal. I had thought family was the safest place. And when it was no longer safe, I learned to keep evidence, take a deep breath, and stand with my back straight in the crowd. Tonight, I recount each beat, slow and steady, like the way a wound closes. Not noisy, but persistent. Welcome to my channel, where we give back a place to stand to those who have been pushed to the margins. Thank you for spending your time here. Every view, every comment of yours is like a handshake. I believe you. If you have ever had someone treat status as a weapon, leave Yenkir's still here so I know you are standing next to me. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because behind that curtain of golden lights, we will have many more flips where the truth deserves to speak. Before the room goes silent, rewind to the Queen's mornings, where I learned to stand up straight from the smallest things. My mornings start with the warm smell of butter and the low hum of the espresso machine in a bakery in Astoria, where I clock in at 5, my hands still cold from the Queen's wind sweeping through the still empty streets. I am Anna. I live in a walk-up in Jackson Heights, the window looking out at a fire escape strung with small lights left from last Christmas. Every night, the wind brushes the strand so it clicks softly like a heartbeat that has learned patience. I take the 7 line back along Roosevelt Ave, hearing a whole world talking around me. The Spanish of the woman pushing a tamales cart, the Hindi of the newsstand uncle, the Nepali of the spice seller at the corner market, interwoven with my small English when I ask for directions. Say thank you. Hand customers back a few coins in change. Life is simple, but bustling. Up early. A nap at noon. In the afternoon, stopping by the Nepali grocer for dill and masala powder. In the evening, sharing hot pot with a few neighbors. The broth ticking, morning glory, and mushrooms shoulder to shoulder. Salted lime bowls passed from hand to hand. Life stories weaving together like trains crossing a steel bridge. I filed for a legal marriage, got the work card, EAD, tucked in my wallet like a small charm, each month marking a full moon on the calendar. One step closer to the interview. Daniel puts his arm around my shoulders at the 74th Street station entrance, speaking softly through a cold season mask. Slow and steady, okay? I nod, believing in that slow, steady rhythm the way I trust my hands to weigh flour to the gram, to bake croissants to the color of amber. The shop owner, Mariela, speaks to me in Spanish fast as a rainstorm, teasing and teaching at once. Girl, dough is like life. Don't rush. Don't get discouraged. I laugh, wipe flour from my cheek, answer in the mother tongue that makes me miss late afternoons back home, then turn to a customer and offer a soft English line. Your coffee? Have a sweet day. On break, I open my phone, scroll through emails from Aisha, the lawyer, reminding me to save every receipt, every message, to keep the small things like threads in case we need to stitch up a tear. In the afternoon, I pass a sari shop blazing with color, lengths of red and green silk fluttering like festival flags. I often stop for a few seconds, look into the mirror, and tell myself, I, too, am one color in the big shawl called New York. In the evening, Daniel swings by Jackson Heights with a bag of beef from the Korean market. We set the hot pot on the small nicked wooden table. He says, Mom needs time. She's just particular. I give a thin smile, ladle him more enoki, and answer, I only need respect. We put on soft salsa. The neighbor's cat hops over the balcony and stares as if it wants to join the party. I pack a bag I call the peace of mind bag. Photocopies of documents, a copy of the notice, a few wedding photos rushed to print, the wedding ring wrapped in a handkerchief. I don't want to live in worry, but I understand that calm also needs to be prepared. Night falls. Jackson Heights hums. The 7 train passes like a long-held note. I stop by Wawa for a bottle of tea, hear the Jamaican cashier say, Take care, baby, and wish me good night. In the kitchen, the chicken soup simmers, warmth fogs the glass. I write a few lines in my journal. Sold out the almond batch today. The weather is cold, but my heart is warm. I've touched a small part of my dream, to work under my own name, to come home with my own key. In Queens, people say family is everything. I'm trying to build a family from simple things. A lit room, a man who knows how to listen, a few friends in the hallway, and the belief that, slow and steady, I will get there. By foot, by heart, and by a perseverance no one can take away. Sunday, we went over to Whitestone for dinner with the Russo family. A long table draped with a white cloth, tomato sauce bubbling in the pot, the smell of oregano wrapping the whole kitchen. I set out the salad. Daniel uncorked the wine. Everything seemed like a peaceful family picture until Carmela put down her fork, lifted her face, and dropped a line like a velvet-wrapped blade. She has no status. The whole table froze for a beat. The football on TV seemed to recede. I gave a thin smile so I wouldn't shake. The spoon lightly touching the rim of the bowl sounded as thin as a string. In Queens, people say family is everything. But when someone invokes status like a curse, it's no longer a legal term. It's a way to push you to the margins, as if even your seat were provisional. In the days after that, the red flags began to tiptoe over the threshold. Mail from USCIS that used to come to the house suddenly went missing. I waited for the white envelope with the blue logo while the mailbox held only a laundromat flyer. I texted Aisha to ask the procedure to request a resend, then bought a stack of clear plastic folders, labeling them by month. At night, I spread the envelopes I still had on the kitchen table, photographed each one, noted the time received, the ink color, the postmark. Priya, my friend in IT, texted me, Keep all the metadata, Anna. Screenshot everything. Don't delete anything. I didn't want to turn my home into a checkpoint, but sometimes calm has to be built with small discipline. Then came the email, an address that looked almost official. usis.case.helpaconsult.gmail.com. Demanded a processing fee via Zelle. I read it over and over, my stomach sinking with a bad feeling. Aisha said, Don't respond. Don't send money. I created a separate folder in my inbox, red flags, dragged that email into it, and added a few lines of description. Late that night, a call from an unknown caller rang through the dark room. A raspy voice threatened deportation if I didn't cooperate. I set automatic recording, capturing even the next door wall clock striking 12. After the call, I got up to make tea, my hands a little shaky, but my head clear. I opened my notebook and copied down every number, every minute and second. I knew that if one day the truth needed proving, memory wouldn't carry it. Only paperwork would. Another dinner at the Russos. Carmela pulled her chair close to me, her voice low and steady. My son isn't going to shoulder anyone's legal risk. I lifted my face. I have an EAD, an SSN, full taxes. She curled her lip, smiling like someone had told a bad joke. Good. Then be independent. The meal continued with polite small talk, but the lasagna suddenly went dry in my mouth. That night on the 7 line, Daniel held my hand, his hand warm but confused. She needs time. I looked out at the neon of Roosevelt Ave reflected in the window, feeling myself sitting between two worlds, one that demanded I prove every piece of paper, and one I was slowly building by getting up early, baking, paying taxes, loving a man who knows how to apologize. I went home, took down the peace of mind bag, added a few photos of the mailbox, the call recording, printouts of the strange email. My chest felt a little calmer, not because I was safe, but because I knew how to put up a fence for myself. The next day, Priya came by and showed me how to save a hash for the audio file. We did it while playing soft salsa, like sprinkling sugar on a day that had already taken too much salt. I wrote in my journal, they use the word status like a whip. I answer with evidence like a seatbelt. I am not without status. I have a life I'm lining back up straight. And in that way, I remind myself, slow and steady is not slowing down to endure, but slowing down to see clearly, so every step you set down has ground beneath it. Priya sat down at my kitchen table next to the still steaming pot of mint tea, opened her laptop and said, "Look closely at this." She clicked on the email's Show Original, pointing out the tiny lines I had never noticed before. The real sender address tucked behind a pretend agency-looking name, a stray via, and a string of characters that Priya summed up. Not from an official system, just Gmail in costume. I exhaled, feeling as if a curtain had just been lifted. From that day, I started letting things speak for me in silence. Screenshot the strange emails, download and park them. Screenshot the Zelle request from an odd alias with the note, processing fee, case. Photograph the USCIS envelope, whose flap had been opened and sloppily sealed back, the glossy glue edge, the crease that didn't match the postmark. I kept a dedicated notebook, writing the time, date, location. Each page had a small folded corner like a secret waypoint for myself. Aisha texted one very short but steady line. New York only needs one-party consent to record. If you feel safe, go ahead and keep it. The first time I hit record in the voice memo app, my hand shook like standing before a vast sea. I set the phone half inside the canvas tote, half touching the floral tablecloth in the white stone dining room. A spoon touched a plate with a thin sound. Carmela's voice was soft as honey but fell drop by drop. I have friends at the department. It's just, if you want your case to go faster, they need a sum to grease it. I swallowed, trying to keep my heartbeat from thudding into the mic. I don't understand, I said slowly. What sum? She gave a small laugh. Grown-ups talk to each other, child. 25,000 via Zelle. I'll send an alias for convenience. I looked down at the table, the wood grain flowing into waves. My head went bright, and my hands were strangely calm. I let the silence stretch a few seconds so her last sentence would fall cleanly into the device. The second time, I prepared more carefully. I laid a thin napkin under the phone so friction wouldn't scratch the recording, sat slightly angled to see the rim of Carmela's water glass reflecting her phone screen. Your papers? They'll carry risk, she said, voice even, but if you cooperate, I can take care of it. I repeated, cooperate means money? She stopped circling. Money. I heard myself exhale very slowly, like a baker tending the oven fire, and switched the subject to the cannoli for dessert, as if that conversation had never happened. I stopped the recording, immediately sent a copy to Aisha by email, and saved the original to the external drive Priya brought. We didn't stop there. Priya helped me screenshot the Zelle request. The shot clearly showed the date, time, the misspelled display name for case help, the destination bank not matching any public account. I took close-ups of the USCIS envelope edge, the fresh glue sheen brighter than the base paper. I set the envelope on a white sheet and penciled the photo number in the right corner, like numbering a batch coming out of the oven. Each time I listened back, I heard my voice shake less. The first time, my hands trembled. The second time, I set the phone close against the tablecloth. The third time, she said the word money herself. Some nights, I lay staring at the ceiling of the Jackson Heights apartment, the 7 train passing with a long ribbon of sound, thinking about the fragility of invisible borders, between love and control, between family and manipulation. I didn't want to argue, didn't want to shout. I wanted the truth to walk into the room on its own schedule. In the morning, I took the notebook to the bakery, tucked under the stack of butter and sugar invoices. Amid the smell of just-baked croissants, I scratched a few lines. Call 1014, unknown caller. Content. Threatened deportation. Saved file, 2025-56. Voice. Memo, Chituat M4A. I also wrote a line to myself. Anna, don't forget to breathe. You're not alone. When I left the shop, Queens was cold and clear. Sunlight touched the hand holding my wallet with the EAD, SSN, the small letters confirming I work under my own name. I smiled, took out my phone, opened the list of recordings, new heartbeats of courage, and knew I had crossed a threshold. From fear to initiative, from being called without status, to documenting, piece by piece, the evidence of my legitimate existence. The rain poured onto the thin tin roof of the Jackson Heights apartment like a steady beat tapping on my chest. From the kitchen window, I watched a patch of light from the 7 train flare and then disappear. The damp raincoat smell blending with the sugar and flour scent left over from the early baking shift. The phone buzzed. The Russo family opened the status topic in the group again. Carmela, accidentally, dropping a vague line that I married for papers. Messages popped like popcorn. Someone sent a link to an article about sham marriages, a headshake icon. I hadn't yet replied when Daniel knocked, standing there under a soaked brim, dark circles under his eyes. He didn't repeat his mother's words, and he didn't defend me noisily. He just spoke in a tired, lowered voice. I don't believe you married for papers. But the whole family is going crazy right now. Maybe we split for a few weeks. To keep the peace. The words, to keep the peace, fell to the floor like a porcelain bowl breaking without a sound. I sat down, listened to the rain pounding on the fire escape, heard my heart slip out of rhythm. I didn't cry because I was afraid of being kicked out of America. I have an EAD, I pay taxes. I have a job that smells of butter every morning. I cried because a whole life suddenly got wrapped into the word risk, both cold and cheap. I stuffed a few sets of clothes into a tote, hugged the red flags binder holding printed emails, a slit-open envelope, screenshots of the Zelle request. I locked the door, went down the creaking wooden stairs, stepped into the speckled rain. Priya texted, "Come over. My couch has room." Priya's apartment was warm like a little tea shop, yellow lights, a floral comforter, the smell of masala chai. She poured me a cup, let me sit and breathe in silence, then asked, "Do you want to talk or keep quiet?" I shook my head, both hands cupping the mug for warmth, tears falling on their own like a small rain in a dry room. Priya didn't give tough love pep talks. She just pulled the blanket up a little higher, then slowly tucked the printouts I brought into a lidded plastic box. Your truth needs shelter from the rain, too. That night, I texted Aisha, I'm at Priya's. I'm okay. Aisha replied immediately, Good. Tomorrow we'll review each item, then plan next steps. You don't have to run. You prepare. I set the phone down, looked at the ceiling speckled with water gloss reflections of the streetlights. In my head, the afternoon's lines looped. To keep the peace, no status, processing fee. I counted beats the way I tend the oven. 1, 2, 3, to bring my breathing back to normal. In the living room, Priya put on a low rainforest playlist. I pulled my backpack close, took out the wallet with my EAD, touched the card like touching an anchor. Suddenly I remembered the bakery owner's laugh this morning, the smell of strong coffee, and the good morning from the yellow cab driver. The small pieces of my life here stitched back together into a fabric tougher than a rumor. The next morning, the sky was still overcast but lighter. Priya drew 3 columns on paper. Truth we have, what they say, what to do next. I read each line out loud to myself. Recordings, mention of money, email spoof, headers, Zelle, alias, USCIS envelope slit open, EAD, SSN, pay stubs. Then I wrote in the 3rd column, request mail delivery change to a P.O. box, set a meeting with Aisha to file an impersonation complaint. Save another copy of the recordings to a separate hard drive. When I held the pen, my hand stopped shaking. I understood that being turned into a risk makes you want to disappear, but it's the very small things. A file, a timestamp, a friend, a couch, that pull you back into presence. By noon, the rain stopped. I walked along Roosevelt Ave for a hot ear of corn, looked at the stream of people speaking every kind of language and felt suddenly stronger. I am not the footnote under someone else's family photo. I am my own story, being written slowly, clearly, and straight. And if someone still calls as an unknown caller tonight to threaten me, I will hit record the way I normally light the oven, not out of fear, just with care. Queens can be cold, but I've learned to throw on another layer, the layer of evidence, of friendship, and of self-respect that no one is allowed to shove under. Aisha Khan's small office sat on the 2nd floor of a red brick row in Jackson Heights, the glass door fogged by a fine drizzle. I sat across from her, hands wrapped around a hot cup of masala tea, listening to the 7 train roll by like a steady drumbeat. Aisha opened the silver laptop, her voice calm as if every word had been weighed. Let's start by preserving everything. She plugged in a drive, downloaded the recordings of Carmela's calls, pulled the email headers into a folder named Preserve. The photos of the USCIS envelope slid open. The screenshot of the Zelle request from that odd alias turned out to look as ordinary as the pictures I save every day. Only today, they carried the weight of truth. Aisha printed a sheet with a firm cease and desist at the top, a short text demanding an end to any intimidation, any hinting at connections at the agency, or any allegations of a sham marriage. No heavy language needed, she said. A single line of boundary is enough. In the afternoon, Aisha called USCIS Fraud Detection and National Security. I sat listening to the transfers ring, the smell of rain seeping through the door, my hands a little cold but my heart warm. She verified each point. Does USCIS ever take a processing fee via Zelle? Does it use a personal Gmail to communicate? The voice on the other end answered firmly, no. They sent an additional standardized email stating that all fees go through official systems. Any impersonating Gmail addresses are scams. Anyone receiving deportation threats should record the information and report it. Aisha nodded. her eyes sliding over the screen and then back to me. "We have written confirmation. Put it next to your recordings, and the picture will speak for itself." I asked quietly, "Do we need a private meeting?" Aisha shook her head. "No private confrontations. We go public. When she's most confident." The plan unfolded on paper like a seating chart. The 30th anniversary of Russo Global Foods in Long Island City. A glass-walled banquet room facing Manhattan, Carmela slated to give a speech affirming that family is the foundation. Aisha told me to breathe, slowly. "There are two things in that room, the truth and a microphone. We'll bring both." She called the event's DJ, introduced herself as counsel representing a tribute segment that needed to be slotted into the audio schedule, asked for a brief music break, promised proper levels, a duration of a few dozen seconds. The DJ's voice over the phone was as friendly as the smell of fresh bread. "Just give the cue." Aisha chose the signal to be 3 glass taps, so no one would suspect a thing. She sent over the trimmed audio file, Carmela admitting 25 grand, someone at the agency, and the phrase, "via Zelle," falling as clearly as raindrops hitting glass. In the days of waiting, Aisha and I worked like piecing a quilt. She arranged the files in chronological order, labeled each recording with date and time, printed USCIS confirmation to clip right after the photo of the slit-open envelope. I wrote a few lines for myself, not for revenge, to give the name back. Priya stopped by with a clear plastic box holding all the copies, grinning. "Your cake rose at the right temperature. Now it's time to take it out of the oven." The night before the event, I lay on Priya's couch, listened to the rain tapping the sill, pictured the warm gold ballroom, champagne glasses clinking, and the moment the microphone lowers. I remembered Aisha's instruction. "You don't need to speak loudly. Just stand straight, introduce your full name, and let the recording do the rest." On the big morning, I walked along Roosevelt Ave and bought a new lipstick. Not to look pretty, but to remind myself, I am here. Before leaving, I laid my hand on the file and felt my heart ease its pounding. The months of being called without status suddenly shrank beside a few pages, a few audio clips, and a simple confirmation email. I texted Daniel, "I'll be there tonight, and I won't say much. It's just, the truth needs to be turned on." He replied with a single line, "I'll sit and listen." As evening fell, Long Island City lit up. In my tote, besides the wallet with my EAD card, I carried a thumb drive and a small belief that in New York, where words can be sharp as knives, there are still moments when paperwork meets a microphone and the truth speaks without trembling. I began the days leading up to the anniversary night with small, steady tasks like the folds of a kitchen towel. In the morning, I woke earlier than usual, whipped cream for the signature tres leches, then brought the whole tray to the shop, placing a card that read, "For the morning crew. Thank you for always being gentle." I wanted to remind myself, in the middle of a storm, we can still be kind. At noon, I biked to the Queen's Library and slipped into an English pronunciation class. The teacher handed each of us a reading sheet. I repeated slowly each sound: status, process, dignity, hearing my voice round out a little as if my spine had straightened by one more notch. In the afternoon, I called the IRS from the corner of Priya's kitchen table, angling the phone so speaker wouldn't boom. I confirmed my tax record was still clean, wrote down the call code and the time in a small notebook. After hanging up, I laid all the papers out on the table: EAD, SSN, pay stubs, tax filings, photos of envelopes, email headers, all neatly photocopied and placed into a white binder. I added colored tabs: work, USCIS, bank, audio, C&D. Each time I pulled a tab, I felt myself settle into a calm like a string, tuned to the right note. Priya laughed. Your binder looks like justice. I laughed too and wrote on the spine with a pen. Anna, evidence, 2025. Daniel, meanwhile, was silent. I knew because he didn't send vague messages anymore, only a screenshot. The cease and desist email had reached his mother's inbox. No emoji, no excuses. Only a subject line heavy as a stone set on the table. Request to cease threatening conduct. I looked at the image, feeling both cold and warm. Cold because the distance between us hadn't closed. Warm because for the first time, he let the truth pass straight through his house without bending it. At night, while I was arranging trays of cakes for the next day, the unknown caller number popped up again. I didn't shake anymore. I set the phone down on the towel, hit record before answering. Carmela's voice slid through like a thin blade. Make the transfer tonight. It'll all be done. I didn't argue. I just asked slowly. To which alias, ma'am? She recited the name I had already written in the binder. I said, yes, thank you for confirming. Then I ended the call, saved the file, sent it to Aisha, and added another line to the column, Truths I Have. I no longer felt small in the face of anonymous threats. I felt like the gatekeeper of my own life. On some afternoons, I took the binder to the small park near Roosevelt, sat under the trees, and listened to children running around. I flipped through each document sleeve like flipping through an album. This is the day I learned email headers can protect me. This is the night I learned to set the phone close against the tablecloth. This is the morning I practiced pronouncing dignity until my lips stopped tripping. I realized strength doesn't come from shouting in a crowded room, but from the ability to keep your breath steady and line up the truths. When Daniel texted, I'll come to the event, I'll listen, I simply replied, thank you. That was enough. On the night before the big day, I brought a still warm tres leches to the staff preparing the event in Long Island City. For good energy, I said, the sweet milk scent spreading into the cold room. On the way back, the river wind felt cooler. I brushed my fingers over the spine of the binder in my tote, like touching a backbone newly set. The VO in my head spoke clearly. No microphone needed. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You only need tidy paperwork and a straight back. And tomorrow morning, I will stand tall, hand on the white cover, looking straight toward the mic, and let the truth do the rest. The river-facing banquet hall shone like a mirror, a band of golden lights drizzling honey over the champagne flutes that were gently fizzing. At the far end of the room, a photo wall printed with the logo Russo Global Foods, 30 years, glittered like a metal polished too much. I stood at the edge, hand gripping the spine of the binder in my tote, listening to the DJ blend a Latin pop track soft as foam. Carmela stepped onto the stage, her sequined dress exploding with light under the lamps, smiling with the largesse of a hostess, her voice carrying through the mic. Our family is the foundation. Tonight, I want someone in the family to come up and say what must be said. Her gaze swept the crowd and then locked onto me. Anna, come up here. Apologize to the family. Let's put this behind us. A circle of silence opened right beneath my feet. Daniel half rose and softly said, Mom, stop. But Carmela's hand pressed him lightly back into his seat, gentle enough not to be coarse, firm enough to quiet the whole table. I took a long breath, feeling my spine touch the back of the binder like touching a solid beam of wood. Aisha stood by the DJ booth, her eyes on me like a nod. I did not step onto the stage. I only placed my hand on my chest and tapped 3 times on the tote's cover, the signal we had agreed on. The music dropped. The sub-bass receded like a tide. Then the familiar sound, harsh and cold, poured down from the ceiling. Transfer 25,000 via Zelle. I've got someone in the department. If not, you know which number ICE calls. The whole room, crowded like a rush-hour train car, became a vacuum chamber. The clink of a spoon against a glass cutoff. A stray cough. Someone dropped a napkin. My voice, uncannily calm on the recording, answered, "Are you asking for a bribe?" And Carmela's voice snapped back, not the least bit shaky. "Call it grease." From the DJ booth, Aisha pressed another button. The screen next to the photo wall lit up, showing a blown-up email header frame, the Gmail domain blinking under the cursor, and the line not.gov that Aisha had neatly annotated in the corner. Next, a cease and desist slide appeared like a crisp red card. I heard the man wearing the name badge, Marco, CFO, at the first table turn to Daniel. "What is this?" Daniel went pale, his lips sharpening into a hard line, his eyes lingering on the screen longer than a single breath. Carmela grabbed the mic, trying to salvage it. "She staged this. She's hated me from the start. Those files, anyone can fake them." Aisha stepped fully from the dark into the light, needing no stage, her voice spreading like a line of ink. "New York is one-party consent. This recording is lawful. USCIS has confirmed in writing. They do not take off-the-books fees. They do not use personal Gmail. This is evidence of intimidation and soliciting money in exchange." She didn't speak loudly, but each word drove a nail into the air. I saw a few employees in the middle rows, the accountant, the warehouse lead, shift position, set their glasses down, their eyes moving off the owner to look toward us. People who had been mere background suddenly had faces, and in those faces were the questions they had never dared to ask. I could feel the butter and sugar scent of my bakery mornings slip into memory, lifting my hand up right to the level of the side table's mic. "I am not without status," I said slowly, letting the consonants stand upright the way I had practiced in the library pronunciation class. "I have standing and a voice." I set the binder on the table beside me, opened the audio tab, then USCIS, like opening a photo album before relatives. This is the day I was authorized to work. This is the day someone threatened me. This is the day I learned to keep records. I turned back to Carmela. She looked at me with the gaze that used to make me lower my eyes at family dinners. Tonight, it slid off like a drop of oil that can't cling to a glass of water. I continued without hiss, without sarcasm. If someone uses status as a weapon, the first thing wounded is not me, but the decency of this family. Daniel stood up, this time not pushed back down. He walked toward the mic on the stage, his hand trembling slightly but not hiding it. He looked at his mother first, then at me, then at Marco, and finally at the employees waiting for him to say what a leader must say. "I've been silent too long," he exhaled, his voice hoarse as if he'd just run across the Queensboro Bridge. "I believed in peace over truth. I'm sorry to my wife. I'm sorry to the team. The people who have been working under a shadow that shouldn't have been there." I felt my shoulders release, not because I'd won, but because the space between the people we love finally held a right sentence. Marco nodded lightly, as if he'd heard what he needed to start his part. Aisha closed the laptop and stepped back, leaving room for the family to decide the next moment on their own. At the back of the room, someone clapped. 1, 2, then into a steady rasp. Not a roar, not the cheers of a movie. Just the sound of people agreeing with the truth, arriving on time. Carmela set the mic down on the table with a weary gesture, like putting down a heavy handbag she'd carried too long. She looked around, searching for an ally, but the velvet chairs returned only her reflection. I Only wanted what's best for the company, she said, like an old incantation that no longer works. And for my son. Daniel swallowed and replied, "What's best for the company means no one, including you, gets to use the law as a club." He turned to the event MC. "Give us 5 minutes." Then he took my hand. Not pulling, not leading, just holding as a way of asking permission to stand beside me for the rest. I heard the music return, the DJ raising the volume just enough to ease the room's awkwardness, while a small HR team quietly went to review the internal complaint process, like a good instinct awakened. I looked out at the river, Manhattan's streaks of light flowing like ink on paper, and for a moment I thought of the pronunciation class, the tres leches this morning, the white binder sitting obediently in my tote. Some lives have to take the long way to arrive at 2 words, legal standing. But standing here, between the mic and the truth, I knew I would remember this night not because someone was exposed, but because we, the small people, managed to say a complete sentence. I am here, in my own name, in my own voice, and no one is allowed to take it away. After the mic lowered, the process took over. Documents, confirmation emails, and doors closing the right way. After the party, the city returned to its nighttime breath. The Queensboro Bridge blinked like an electric heart. I sat at Priya's kitchen table, the binder still warm in my hands, the refrigerator humming softly. Aisha opened her laptop and sent the final packet we had prepared all week. The audio recordings, photos of the envelopes, the email headers, the call logs. A minute later, my inbox buzzed. Queens DA, we have received your complaint. The blue line of text lay there quietly. No fireworks, no cheers, just a confirmation. Across the city, the glass door of the prosecutor's office closed as gently as a period. The next morning, as I was pouring coffee, Daniel's phone rang. I heard him say, "Hello?" and then switched to speaker so Aisha beside us could hear clearly. A polite male voice, introducing himself as staff from FDNS under USCIS, asked briefly and directly, "Has anyone in the family ever claimed to have someone inside the department or promised to speed up the case?" Daniel looked at me, his hand to his forehead as if apologizing once more. He answered, "Yes, my mother. But we have submitted evidence, and we are not participating." On the other end, only the light tapping of keys, a word of thanks, and the call ended like a door closing without a sound. At noon, Officer Rivera of the NYPD called Aisha directly. "Ms. Carmela Russo needs to appear to give a statement," he said, his voice neither icy nor soft, a kind of neutrality that makes the listener measure the seriousness for themselves. At the end of the sentence, he added, "We will seize her phone pursuant to procedure to extract the Zelle transactions." I imagined Carmela's red-polished hand freezing on her handbag, imagined her heels stopping on the cold tile of the precinct lobby, a place that does not believe in promises, only in logs. Aisha filed for me with the court a family order, a temporary protective order barring Carmela from contacting or threatening. When the court server knocked, I wasn't there. I heard Daniel recount, "Mom opened the door," was surprised for a second, then signed, "No arguing." I didn't rejoice, I just exhaled. There are boundaries that need to be built with paperwork, so the heart can rest. On the family company's side, Marco, the CFO who keeps a quiet face and always speaks in numbers, sent a notice of board session, immediate. I knew because Daniel forwarded it to me, a new kind of transparency he was learning. The meeting was short, compressed. Marco laid out brand risk, retailer contracts, the ethics clause every manager had signed. In the end, the line appeared in the minutes. Suspend Ms. Carmela from all executive functions until the investigation concludes. No gavel strike, only the submit button of the online meeting blinking green and going dark. By evening, Daniel sent me the statement he had signed. 2 paragraphs, 1 public apology to the team, 1 affirmation that he supports the process and will put truth before silence. I sat in the kitchen reading it over and over, listening to the rain pulse against the tin roof. Aisha texted, "Good. Let the process run. Don't respond to anything else." I turned off the screen and let the small warm light fall on the binder. For the first time in many weeks, I didn't need to sleep with it in my arms. Carmela, I heard, came to the precinct pursuant to the summons. The NYPD printed the report the way people print receipts, steady-handed, without hedging. They asked about the grease remarks, about the transfers, about the fake emails impersonating the feds. A new entry was added to the file: potential offense of misusing the name of a government agency. Somewhere else, a phone opened to the banking screen, a fingerprint on the glass like a story forced to be read aloud. No one screamed, no one collapsed. There were only the people who write and the people who sign. Night draped over the city like a thick cloth. I walked along Roosevelt. The tamales stand had packed up. The bubble tea shop closed early because of the rain. The Nepali signs dimmed their lights. I bought a small bouquet of white lilies at the corner. A new habit to remind myself that peace also needs to be scheduled. At home, I set the flowers in a glass, texted Daniel. "I'm home." He replied, "I'll come by tomorrow, not to apologize more, just to have dinner." I smiled to myself, listening to the rain tapping the door like a quiet caller. Justice in New York turns out to be exactly like confirmation emails. Not flashy, no soundtrack, but when you need to reopen them, they're always there. Stamped with time, sender, recipient. And somewhere in Long Island City, the DA's office door closed behind a woman who once thought the microphone belonged to her. On this side of the river, I poured more hot water into my cup, opened the binder only to fold it shut and put it away. I no longer have to carry it like a shield. Tonight, I can set it down because another sheet of paper, finer, cleaner, has stood up in my place. When the paperwork stands firm, the rest is to keep living, kindly and upright. When someone threw at me the line, "You don't have status," that night my hands trembled with shame. Today, that line is only like a comma in life. I read past it, back straight and heart light. After the storm, Queens returned to its usual rhythm. The early sky a pale blue. The 7 trains screeched past Roosevelt, and Priya and I sat in the corner of a small Jackson Heights shop, a plate of crispy, steaming dosa. I opened the notice of promotion to sous chef. Priya smiled with a squint. "See? We live decently. Life returns decency." In the afternoon, Daniel and I walked into the marriage therapy room. He has moved out on his own, set boundaries with his mother, practiced apologizing through actions instead of promises. We don't yet know what name the future will call: husband and wife moving on or kind friends. But this time, when I placed my hand on his, I knew trust must be built, not begged for. At home, I brought a tres leches cake to Aisha's office. She took it and joked, "Justice pairs well with tres leches." I laughed, felt my heart soothed like milk, and only wanted to say thank you to you, the community who watched, who commented, who reminded me that the truth is never alone. This channel exists thanks to each time you share a scratch and a way to heal, thanks to each quiet but warm view. Best revenge is living well. Live decently and with a straight back. If this story touches you, comment the number 1 so I know you're still here. Like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes about status being misused and how the truth speaks up. Thank you for going with me to this peaceful stretch. From here, we move on, slowly, clearly, and calling by the right name what we believe.